The one and only Greg Auman from Fox Sports. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Doing well, Jay. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Give me some good news. It's so so I can't tell you how many times. Like I was gonna count how many times that you answered the question about Chris Godwin being franchise tagged. Because if I had a nickel for every time, I think I may be a millionaire, and I think I might buy Fox Sports myself. So sorry, Rupert. Move on over. Uh, but let's just start right now. No chance he's gonna get tagged for a third time because quarterback money. And I don't know if the Bucs necessarily want to pay him what, 40 million?
Yeah, right. It makes. I mean, they've done it twice before. If it were just the regular receiver franchise tag, hey, maybe they do it. But yeah, it hasn't ever happened before. But if a guy gets tagged a third time, it goes to the highest position, which of course is quarterback. So yeah, 1 year, 41 million. Chris Godwin's a good receiver. I'm not sure he's a $41 million receiver. So that's
not gonna happen. But the more and more we're getting it, and now we're hearing this news, and you were the first really person to talk about it yesterday, is the fact that the Bucs and Chris Godwin are pushing this date back. This has got to be a positive sign for a reconciliation to bring number 14 back here in Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah, and that's not that surprising. I mean, I've kind of thought about the Godwin negotiations a lot like the Mike Evans negotiations, maybe even friendlier, if you will. Again, this is all Chris Godwin has known. Drafted in Tampa, played in Tampa, won a Super Bowl here, got married here, baby here. Lots of reasons he wants to stay. Coming off a major injury, the continuity of being in the same place, those all mean a lot to him. So it's tough for NFL teams to pay two receivers $20 million or more each. But I think the Bucs feel like Godwin adds a lot to this offense. Not in terms of, when you think about who he was first, 8 games of 2024, was a top 5 receiver, period. Was their best offensive player really the first 2 months of the season. So it's just a matter of how confident they can get back to that and be the same Chris. That's a big injury to come back from. He's certainly shown he can come back from major injuries before. But no, I think everything's kind of going on course for them to work out a deal that keeps him here. Right now, probably just another 2 or 3 years. But I think he's like Mike Evans. I think he wants to play his whole career here.
Is there any concern, do you think, from the Buccaneers that a new play caller, right? And listen, because we've seen the different, I think it's a fair question. Even if you have a similar background, even if you are promoting from within, bringing Grizzard up. I mean, you saw the difference with Chris in the Dave Canales offense and the Liam Cohen offense. Any hesitation, you think, at all with Chris being able to assimilate himself and be as productive as he was in 24? In 25, or is there more of a comfort level knowing that there's probably going to be less of a deviation or probably more of a similarity to Liam Cohen than what we saw 2 years ago with Dave Canales?
Yeah, I think if this were kind of like a year ago, if it were someone brand new coming in from outside that Chris Godwin doesn't know, there might be more of a hesitation there. I think the fact that they've chosen Josh Grizzard, that continuity is a priority, having somebody he's worked with and knows kind of how he operates. This offense will be different for sure. There's different play caller, different guy in charge. But I think fundamentally, I think the goal would be to have things as close to the success they had this past year. And obviously, Godwin was a big part of that when he was here and healthy. So no, I think that's a potential hurdle. And if it were someone like completely outside, didn't know how he would operate, didn't know how he would value Chris Godwin. I mean, I think Josh was in all those meetings with Cohen, with the players. So I think they know each other. And without knowing exactly how that offense will work, I think they probably have a good idea of it.
Just saw a recent mock draft that had McMillan, the big-time wide receiver from Arizona, going to the Bucs there in the first round. What is your thought process on that? Because I look at it, if you're bringing Chris Godwin back, I thought Jalen McMillan himself took some big strides. And I just look at the other holes, and I know some people will say, well, the argument is you want the 4th best pass rusher or the 1st best wide receiver. Well, if they just needed a pass rusher, I understand that. They need interior linebackers. They need corners. The defensive tackle I don't think would hurt as well. What do you think the chances are, especially if Chris Godwin comes back, that the Bucs draft for a wide receiver in the first round?
Yeah, first of all, I don't think McMillan's going to be there at 19. I think you see a lot of mocks where he goes at 6, where he goes at 8, where he goes at 10. So first and foremost, I don't think he'll be there to be part of the decision at 19. I would be really surprised if there isn't a strong defensive lean to the top of this Bucs draft. They can do things in free agency to fill holes, absolutely. But they have a couple positions that you need to keep young. You need to keep infusing with high-level talent. Edge, inside linebacker, corner. Those are all positions that the really good ones you don't get in free agency because they don't get put on the open market. So I just think there's a lot of mocks right now where, like, if the Bucs stay at 19, like, there's 4 edges off the board where you're not going to get premier. It's kind of like when the Bucs wanted to tackle and they did really well and they got the 4th tackle in 20 and it just happened to be Tristan Wirfs and was all world. That doesn't always happen that way. So you don't want to reach for a position where the talent's already kind of been stripped bare. You can find talent. They took a 2nd round edge last year. They could very well have one of the first, if not the first, inside linebacker if you want to take an inside linebacker at 19. But I would be surprised in terms of whether they take another receiver. I think Tab McMillan can be a really great player in the NFL. Gives you size. If you're trying to think about life after Mike Evans someday, he's somebody that would benefit from whatever it is, 2 years, 3 years with Mike Evans to eventually take over for him. Okay. But I think they're probably drafting more with 2025 in mind. And I think in doing that, I think your defensive front is probably where it starts. Maybe corner if the right corner was there, but I would be surprised if it's not a linebacker or an edge at 19.
Yeah, I'm with you. A lot of people are wondering if the Buccaneers will be in on any of these guys via trade. A Hendrickson, a Garrett, a Max Crosby, somebody like that. Do you think that's the route they go? Like, I feel like they're going to address it in one of 4 ways. 1, through the draft. 2, they're going to trade for a big piece. 3, they'll sign like a veteran guy, Khalil Mack, on the downside of his career. Or 4, they'll go the Shaq Barrett route, and maybe they'll go to like a Joseph Osai. I had a guy on from Cincinnati yesterday, and he goes, people are talking about Trey Hendrickson, but the guy that a lot of people aren't talking about that played pretty well when Sam Hubbard went down was Joseph Osai, where you look at him and you go, okay, that could be the next Shaq Barrett, where now that he's getting opportunities, he's going to go from a 6 to 8 sack guy to a 15 sack guy. So out of those 4 doors, which one do you think is the most likely that the Bucs kind of open to try to address that pass rushing situation?
Yeah, I don't know that it's the swing for the fences grand slam, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. It's going to cost you more than a number 1. You're going to pay the guy $35 million a year by the time he gets a new deal. That would be kind of restrictive. I think if they thought they were like 1 player away, you might do that. I don't know that they are. I think they're still very much, we like a young core. We want to build around a young core. I think that's the message they're going with. As opposed to, like, if this were like 22 and Brady, maybe they would think they're 1 pass rusher away. So I think, and there's tiers within that. It doesn't have to be Garrett or Crosby. It doesn't have to be a top 5 edge. Trey Hendrickson, again, will want a new deal, will cost less. There's other guys that are available in trade. In free agency, there's guys. I mean, again, Josh Sweat won't cost you a draft pick, will still probably cost you $20 million a year to get an edge rusher. So they have to decide their priorities in terms of, if you get a big dollar pass rusher, a top tier splash signing this year, it makes it tougher to make sure you get Gedeke and McMillan and Cade Otton, the guys that are free agents a year from now, because they don't really have much this year besides Chris Godwin, Levante David to some extent, whether he retires or returns. But there's not a young core that could be leaving. A year from now, they will. A year from now, they'll have 3 or 4 guys that'll really be priority signings. And I think they want to make sure they're not signing somebody now at the expense of then. Absolutely. Edge is a need. I do think they can find value. Again, Joseph Osai is a guy that, again, I think I had mocked to the Bucs 4 years ago as a potential match, and probably would have been a better pick than what they did. But I think so he's more of a reasonable type. He's not going to be a break the bank type. He's going to be a guy you could actually get value in and still have a guy that upgrades your number 2 rusher opposite Diaby, if you will. So that's probably a more reasonable upside. I think it'll be a combination of things. I think they'll be able to add some, like linebacker. Okay, like they probably need to add 2 starting linebackers, whether Levante's back or not, just to be ready for when he is done. So one of those could be a night. There's some really good veteran free agents that are late 20s, 100 tackle a year, veteran pass coverage types. And inside linebacker isn't really a break the bank position. So you can get a good one. I mean, Zach Bond, first team All-Pro, Super Bowl champ, might be a $10 million a year linebacker. It's kind of the running back of the defense in that it doesn't have the high dollar, crazy expensive contracts that you have with corners and with edges, but it happens to be what they need. So that's one of those where they could spend a lot by linebacker standards and it wouldn't be a crazy amount of money.
Greg, it looks like they have 4/5 of the offensive line pretty much set going into next year. Ben Bredesen, I don't know. I know Tristan Wirth loves him. Their continuity on the offensive line is exemplary. Um, I look at a guy like Elijah Klein. They drafted him late draft pick. They really liked him in the preseason and training camp. They moved him around. They seemed like they really trusted him, even playing different spots and a lot of high. I remember they offered him up like to talk on the radio, and I was just like, yeah, it was really weird to. He didn't look like he was going to play a ton, but it seemed like they had their eye on like this kid. Maybe next year could be the piece. Is he an option at the guard spot? Or where else do you think they addressed it in the draft? Do they go back into free agency? Do they bring Bredesen back?
Yeah, that's again all in play. You'll see mock drafts now that have the Bucs going guard at 19. Whether it's Gray's Abel, the small school kid, there's a couple guards that would fit well at 19 there. I'd be surprised if they do that. They have a young line already. But if they like somebody, it's fine. I mean, Ben Bredesen was a great deal for them to get an above average starting guard for $3 million like they got. It was great. He probably won't cost that this time around. He'll probably cost more than that. And they have to decide if the continuity is worth paying him more, how much he values staying versus starting with a third team in 3 years. So Elijah Klein, I mean, he's a guy that, again, barely played at all. They stuck with their 5 when they were healthy at all times. But I think they liked him. I think they feel like he has this offseason to get stronger and bigger. And the foundation is there. So, no, I mean, it would be easy for them to you think about this time last year. Okay, Bredesen wasn't even. I mean, Bredesen came in with $3 million, but I mean, Sua Opeta was another guy they thought might be it. We thought Hainsey might be a guard. I don't think people knew who the left guard was this time last year. So the idea could be Klein. It could be a third round pick. There's a couple different options there. If they feel like Bredesen has priced himself out and they don't want to pay double what they paid him last year or something, it would make sense they would kind of start anew and know they have another option in-house with Klein as a young guy they can build around. They've had other guys that either didn't play or didn't have great rookie years and then really took a step forward in the second year. Cody Mauch did that. Luke Genicky did that. I'm not putting him in the same group as those two, but I think that's their model is give them a year to get their bearings, get them stronger, get them ready, and then see what they can do in year 2. And that's kind of where things stand there. I mean, Elijah Klein's a 6th-round pick. So, I mean, if that works out to be a starter, that's a great, great draft pick. They probably wouldn't put all their eggs in that basket, but I think they could definitely not overspend and put a vet against him and have a good battle in training camp between new veteran and Elijah Klein.
Bucs love themselves a good training camp battle, just not the quarterback position because they're lying to us. All right, before I let you go, let me ask you about the running back position. Bucky's going to be the guy going forward, but where does this leave Rachaad White? I saw him doing some stuff recently, and it's just like there are some people that are saying, well, we should move him. We should trade him. But Bucky, 3 injuries last year, 3 different parts of his body. I don't know if I'd be so quick to get rid of Rachaad White. I know you still have Sean Tucker, but how do you think that whole position group shakes out?
Yeah, I think they bring everybody back. I mean, Chase Edmonds is a free agent, so that they might have a different vet in the room. They might have a different number 4. But in terms of those 3 being the 3 that get the lion's share of the carries, that really should be the case again. The way they, took in terms of things they improved in last year, run game probably top of the list. To go from dead last in the league to top 5, really had a balanced offense for the first time. To know that they'll start with those pieces basically in place is really encouraging and probably a source of confidence for Josh Grizzard in terms of things that he knows they do well.
Right.
But no, I think it'll be a stronger lead on Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving, was 1,000-yard back and didn't really play more than about 60% of the snaps because he had such a late start. So I think you start with him as a default 20 carry, 2/3 of the workload as opposed to half the workload. And then Rachaad, obviously, you have there, I think probably someone they trust in terms of pass protection, in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield. If he just becomes a 3rd down back and becomes a 60-catch, 500-yard rushing, 8-touchdown back, that's a great role to keep the mileage low for Bucky and make sure you're not putting too much of a burden on a young back.
That might work out in their benefit, right, Greg? Because
absolutely.
Going in, right, when you were looking at the strengths of both those guys last year, you're like, well, I know Rachaad was the incumbent. He was the RB1. But when you look at their strengths, ironically enough, that's Rashaad's bag. He is a guy that loves to catch the ball in the backfield and pass block. So in a this worked itself out the way that it probably needed to for the Bucs to be able to accentuate both these guys' strengths.
Right. And if you look at some of the the really good offenses in the NFL right now, they're investing in two backs. I mean, Detroit has Gibbs and Montgomery. You look at the Eagles, and the Eagles probably lean a little heavy on Saquon, but Gainwell does good things for them.
Right.
There's definitely a lot of offenses where the second back, as long as you get the guy who's okay with that role, can really do well and can be a change of pace back. And between the two of them, it's one of those where, if you rush for 2,000 yards between your two backs, you don't care if it's 1,505 or 1,200 and 800. That's kind of the offense they're going to be. And then if Rashad can set himself up, I mean, if that's all he is, he still has a good body of work to go into free agency next year. And I think that's something where, he might be able to go out a year from now and get himself a role where he's more of a number one or more of a 1A. But I think the Bucs are happy to let that be a decision for a year from now and go from there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, you even look at either it's great teams, good teams. Pittsburgh does it with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, right? There's like different. Buffalo's got 3 running backs. They
Right,
that's the way that they were able to deploy their guys. So yeah, it's very exciting. Even I know that's something that the Jets are trying to do this year with Brees Hall and Braylon Allen too. So some really good stuff as always from Greg Auman, Fox Sports. Go check him out. Greg, appreciate your time. Thank you for quelching these franchise tag rumors for Chris Godwin. Good luck on answering those questions, because I'm sure it'll happen until he signs the deal.
Just a few times. Thanks, Jake. Good to see you, man.
Thanks, pal. Talk soon. Greg